Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Primetime Podcast, hosted here on the MVG Nick YouTube channel. My name is Nick, and I hope you guys are doing well whenever you are checking out the latest episode of this podcast that talks about all things in the world of TV, news, reviews, commentaries, and more. And today we are doing the 10th episode of the show here. It is a milestone episode, of course, and I appreciate you guys watching all the way through here since the very beginning back in the summer when we launched this show with our first episode, which at the time was looking at the fall lineups for what was at the time, of course, the upcoming schedule for 2021 to 2022. And for episode number 10, we are coming back full circle here and taking a look at the winter lineups for the 2021 to 2022 TV season here, which is very exciting. I talked about before in that episode that when we get newer shows and the announcements for all the different seasons that we will make follow-ups to it, and this is the first one of that, so I hope you guys do enjoy it as well. We're just going to take a look over all of the different networks and talk about some of the shows that they're either bringing back or some of the new ones that we have to discuss as well, and kind of see overall which networks are doing well and which ones not so much. As always, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. What new shows are you looking forward to? What returning shows are you guys putting on your watch list here that you're going to be checking out? And which ones do you think are going to be the worst of the season here? That is what I'd love to know. As always here as well, make sure you like and subscribe here and share this video out for anyone who also loves TV as much as us. With the introductions out of the way here, let's take a look at some of these new winter lineups here. Beginning with Sunday here, we're just going to go day to day, network to network, and see what all these networks have in store in the next couple of months here. Beginning with ABC here. ABC as a whole for the fall lineup definitely was a bit of a lackluster season so far. Certain days obviously better than others, but as a whole, they are the worst performing network on the schedule at the moment here. Sunday, definitely kind of one of the reasons why. They started off with their kind of game shows and some of their unscripted stuff with America's Funniest Home Videos, Wheel of Fortune, Supermarket Sweep, and The Rookie, which is a police procedural with Nathan Fillion, of course. And they are doubling down here. They are going to stick with this throughout the winter season as well here. I know for spring they usually come back and they do American Idol, so that'll definitely help them out a little bit. But for the winter, they are sticking with this lineup here. This was definitely not the most competitive. It certainly had a solid foundational fan base. Of course, people that really aren't into the serialized formats of the dramas or the adult cartoons or sports or anything like that. It filled a niche, but obviously that niche is just not very big there, unfortunately. And especially Supermarket Sweep here is the worst performing of all these shows. Putting it right in the middle certainly did hinder the performance, especially of The Rookie here. My go-to website, Spoiler TV, has a lot of people that generally comment and have, on the forums and different things like that, always discussing what shows they love, and The Rookie seems to be a big favorite amongst them. And a lot of people very, very nervous that due to the kind of bastardized schedule that they had here, that The Rookie is not really performing as well as it should be, and it might risk cancellation here after its fourth season, which would be kind of disappointing because everything that I've heard, it's a really, really good show. But ABC is sticking with this, so we'll have to see in the next couple weeks how that turns out for them. Let's move on to CBS here. For the fall, they started off with The Equalizer, NCIS LA, and SEAL Team, a great lineup of great police procedurals and great, action dramas here. SEAL Team eventually left the schedule. We knew that going into it, that it was only going to be broadcasting 4 episodes this year, and then it was going to move to Paramount Plus, formerly known as CBS All Access there. In the meantime, it was replaced with just random reruns from various shows of the NCIS franchise here, specifically those of LA, the original, and Hawaii there as one of the new shows as well. But come winter, we are also going to see the return of SWAT here at 10 o'clock, which is going to be very exciting there come January. And then in February, we get Celebrity Big Brother here. Big Brother, I don't know if I've ever publicly commented on it on this podcast, but Big Brother is another one of those CBS kind of reality shows very similar to Survivor that is just not my bag at all. I'm just not a fan of Big Brother. Never understood the appeal of it. I just think it's really boring, honestly. The challenge is very similar to what I said about Survivor in episode 1. They just seem really lame and just like really, really uninteresting outside of the like music and stuff to kind of hype them up. Julie Chen, I have nothing against her as a host, but I don't know. It's just the show as a whole, the like kind of gameplay of it, it just does not interest me whatsoever. But I know for a lot of people that love kind of that like dumb drama, kind of like dumb reality stuff, that Big Brother is a massive, massive show for them. Has kind of like a cult fan base, it's very similar to Survivor. So I'm sure that's going to do just fine here. A lot of people know to expect it in the winter and summer. They usually two seasons of the show within the TV season. So a lot of people expecting this to come back as well. And then when that eventually ends, it's only going to be on for a few weeks here. Then we will see the return of the Equalizer as well there to kind of wrap out the winter lineup here. So CBS doing just fine. Like I said, I think those action dramas are going to do well for them. 60 Minutes as the lead-in as well. Massive show, man. 60 Minutes is absolutely huge right now. Getting at least like 10 to 15 million viewers an episode, of course. A lot of people still love their news, as we've talked about before here, and that's exactly what 60 Minutes does. So even though it's not my bag as well, I can totally respect it, and is a great lead-in for CBS here for those dramas. So definitely a thumbs up for that schedule. Going into the CW here, they had a bit of a tough time on their Sunday lineup here. This was actually a little bit different than where we saw it in that first episode. We have the Legends of the Hidden Temple. That was a reboot and kind of a revamped version of the classic Nickelodeon show from back in the 90s. And then we had a different show originally on the schedule called Killer Camp here, which was an adaptation of a British game show of the same name there. It was really popular over there. It had kind of a Survivor type element to it with like a horror type element, surviving in the woods and all that stuff. Sounded like it'd be a pretty interesting niche type of show, but unfortunately for the CW, it had the lowest ratings of any show on the 2021 season with only 160,000 viewers. That is it. That isn't like in sorry, that isn't with streaming or anything. That is just live viewers there, and that is bottom of the barrel if I've ever seen it, man. That was pitiful for the CW, and they're not really one to pull shows or replace shows that aren't doing well, but that was a new low for them. That was practically a new low for network TV. So they instantly replaced that bad boy with Masters of Illusion. Even if it was just reruns, that was pulling in way better numbers for them. So they had to do something about that, because that was just not going to be sustainable at all. But come winter, they are going to be trying the horror theme again with a more reliable show, Two Sentence Horror Stories. This was a show that actually premiered back in 2018 on CW Seed, which was essentially their streaming service, very similar to Peacock for NBC or CBS All Access, formerly for CBS, of course. The CW had one going as far back as I believe like 2013 or 2014. They were actually one of the first to do their original streaming before like any of the other big networks did it, before ABC had their partnership with Hulu, before Fox launched with Hulu as well. The CW were pretty ahead of their time there, and they had some really good original shows that ended up getting picked up through either other networks or that were eventually broadcast on their main network here, including this one here, which is an anthology series, kind of like The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror or something, but definitely steeped very much in the horror genre there, which was, again, a very interesting niche there. This will be season 3 for it, and like I said, it's a very reliable show for them, so I think that's going to do really well. And then come late winter into spring, we're going to see Riverdale on Sunday, which is pretty interesting. We've never seen Riverdale on Sunday here. The CW generally tries to avoid some of their bigger, more established dramas on the weekends, but I think they're taking a chance this year, and I think Riverdale is an interesting one to go with. Definitely one of their biggest, just in terms of the name recognition on Riverdale there. Originally, it's on Wednesdays, I believe, so they're going to be moving it to Sundays here in the spring, which will be pretty interesting to see how that plays out for them. Not sure yet what's going to follow that at 9, but we still have a few months away from when that ends up happening, so they can take their time with it, try to pair it with something very, very good as well there. So the CW, even though they did fumble it a little bit at the beginning, I think they're definitely learning from their mistakes there, and they're definitely going to be a much stronger network overall in the next couple of months. Moving on to Fox here. Fox right now is doing football, of course, in the afternoons all day, and then they have the OT, which is kind of their after game commentary type show, and then their string of adult comedies there with the animated shows, The Simpsons, The Great North, Bob's Burgers, and Family Guy. A great lineup of shows. Me and my family watch these all the time here. We absolutely love these, of course, and The Simpsons is their big claim to fame, of course. The juggernaut right now, especially in the 18 to 49 demo, The Simpsons is the biggest show on TV in that regard, absolutely dominating there. So that is fantastic for Fox. I love to see it. Always root for these types of shows because they're really going out of style, and Fox is really the only network keeping them afloat here. So to see them do really well is always a great thing. And then winter, we don't know yet what is going to be taking over for the football season. Fox is going to transition away from any of their football either on Sunday or on Thursday in the next couple of months come January. And we'll see what they end up replacing it with. Chances are it'll probably just be reruns of some of these other cartoons, probably The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers most likely, but that's just speculation here. We don't know for sure. And same thing goes for NBC. We're not sure yet what the Sunday lineup is going to be yet following Sunday Night Football's end here for 2021. Some people have speculated that it could be some of their original sitcoms that they ordered for this season, but they actually got put on a different night. We're going to talk about a little bit later in the podcast here when we see those. But for winter, for the Sunday lineup, we just don't know yet. So feel free to speculate in the comments there. Not really sure if they are going to really try to be competitive because they don't really need to be because Sunday Night Football was so big for them. But outside of that, I think definitely CBS, I think, is going to have the overall best lineup here on Sundays, followed by Fox as well with those comedies, always reliable for them. All right, going into Monday here, let's talk about what we have on the winter lineups for this one. For ABC, they started off strong this year with Dancing with the Stars and The Good Doctor. Strong in the sense that those are very reliable shows, bringing in a pretty, sustainable audience there, but not really strong in the sense that they were not really competitive with much of the other shows on the schedule there. But thankfully, they are learning from their mistakes here, and they are finally getting some sports of their own. They were the only ones of the major networks, aside from the CW, that didn't have any sports-related content on the fall lineup. So they are finally getting some with Monday Night Football, which is going to be big for this. Now, looking at the timeline, it will still compete against Sunday Night Football and Thursday Night Football. So there's going to be 3 days on 3 different networks for football. And ABC, unfortunately, is kind of getting the short straw here because they're only going to be doing it for a few weeks. And in addition to that, they're going to have to compete with the other networks. So not really sure how that's going to work out for them, unfortunately. It would have been obviously much stronger if they had started the networks with it, but I'm sure contracts and everything like that probably prevented from it. Sports is just one of those things that all the networks kind of have to compete for, and there's always a ton of money involved in bidding and all that stuff, so it gets really convoluted after a while trying to keep up with it. But fortunately, ABC just was not really lucky this year in getting it, but that will help them at least for a couple weeks kind of bounce back here from kind of the lackluster starts that they had for their fall season in general. But following that in the winter, we're going to see The Bachelor. We saw The Bachelorette in fall, so Bachelor in winter makes perfect sense. We're not sure yet for the first couple of weeks, and that 10 o'clock slot, that's another to be announced. And then we have Promised Land here for January 24th. That'll debut. Not really sure what that is. There's not a lot of information on it, so that's just another one that we're going to have to just wait and see when more stuff comes out about it. This, aside from football, again, is pretty lackluster. The Bachelor is just not something that I'm very interested in. I know a lot of people tend to avoid those types of cheesy dating reality shows, very similar to something like Big Brother. It's just not really for a lot of people. They want a more, dramatized, serialized storyline. So Bachelor is just not really their thing, but it has its fan base, and I can't really argue with that. We'll see what happens with those 10 o'clock shows. Those could be a bit of a hit or miss. We'll see. The Good Doctor, that was definitely something that I myself was a little bit disappointed in this year, because me and my girlfriend really liked The Good Doctor, but we kind of stopped watching it this year. It just wasn't as interesting. Some of the storylines got a little bit cliche and just kind of simplified for us, and didn't really think that it had a lot of we weren't really interested in it as much this year. So that was kind of a little bit lackluster, a little bit disappointing. So we'll have to see if those other dramas kind of make up for it for ABC there. But overall, the winter lineup, a bit of a mixed bag so far for Monday. CBS, on the other hand, I think has a really, really solid one. The only change that we see here from the fall is going to be Celebrity Big Brother again. That's going to be a multi-day thing. It's going to do like 3 or 4 days on the schedule. There's an hour block dedicated to it. But like I said, it's only going to run throughout February, so it's only going to be about 4 weeks or so for its overall season. So that's a pretty interesting strategy they have, and we'll see if that works out for them. But outside of that, their NCISs are doing great right now. The original is the highest rated show in terms of live viewers. Their sitcoms are just fine. Hawaii could be better, but considering it's a spin-off, you have to assume that some people are just not really going to be as fond of it. They want more original content. They want more kind of elaborate stuff, not just rehashed of, these older shows that, a lot of people are just kind of sick of at this point. But outside of that, I think CBS still has a very reliable schedule in place for the winter here. For the CW, they had one of the best shows on TV on Mondays, and they had one of the most disappointing here. The best one, obviously, being All American here. This was a massive, massive sports drama. It still is, I think, the highest rated sports drama on TV right now, which is awesome. Huge on Netflix, too. That is one of the things with this show. CW partnered with them for a syndicated release of on Netflix here. Very similar to what ABC does with Hulu. They do the next day sort of releases, and on the CW, they do the season, once it's over. It's on Netflix there, which is really cool. And All American is a super critically acclaimed show as well. The last couple of seasons have gotten a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes of 100%. So much so that they decided to announce a spinoff for the show in the case of Homecoming here, which is set to premiere in February there as part of the winter lineup, replacing the 4400 here, which is definitely one of the most lackluster and probably the most disappointing show of the season from what I can gather. It's a remake of the original from 2004 that premiered on USA. Kind of a sci-fi mystery thriller action type show, all that good stuff. Kind of looks like something that J.J. Abrams would have had a hand in back in the day, maybe if he was a bigger name at the time, but definitely solid enough premise that a remake was kind of inevitable at some point, because the original, as much as it had a pretty solid foundation and it certainly had some fans behind it, it never was a big enough show or a notable enough IP to get the same sort of recognition as something like Lost or Alias or some of those other thriller mystery type shows from back in the day, especially because it was on cable too. You had to keep in mind as well. So a network based remake was something that I thought was a good idea at the time, but looking at the reviews, a lot of people were just not impressed with it at all. It had a really, really low rating on IMDb. Still does, actually. The last time I checked, it was a 4.1, I believe, out of 10, which is really, really low, even compared to stuff like The Wonder Years or any of the other remakes from this year that were not that good. The 4400 was the worst of them all, so that was kind of disappointing. Obviously did not help in terms of the viewership there. One interesting thing, one little kind of trivial thing about the show though, is one of the actors from the original, Patrick Fluger, is set to make a cameo appearance or as a guest star in one of the upcoming episodes of this show. So that'll be pretty interesting. I actually know him from PD, Chicago PD, where he plays Adam Ruzick, but the 4400, the original, was where he kind of made his name. He was one of the leads on that, so I thought that was pretty cool that they're bringing him back, even for just a little guest star cameo sort of thing towards the end of the season. But fortunately, that just doesn't seem like it's enough to really salvage this show. A little too late there to really do anything for the show's ratings. So definitely, I think Homecoming will be a much stronger show in that same time slot, coming off of the original in the franchise All-American there. I think that is a perfect strategy for the CW to take. For Fox here, we have 911 and The Big Leap, of course. That was the fall lineup here. They are doing something similar for their winter. We're going to see Lone Star, the spinoff of 911. For the spring, they usually put these together, but for the fall and winter, they like to separate them because they know they're both very reliable and they can hold their own and then hopefully help out some of these newer shows that can make them a big hit. They attempted it with the fall lineup with The Big Leap, but that's another one of these new shows that was really, really unfortunately just bombarded with just lackluster viewership stats and just really, really bad kind of reception in terms of the fans and just not a lot of interest there. It's another one that's kind of in a niche genre of musical dramedies that just didn't really do much for them. But the Cleaning Lady, this new show that is set to premiere in January alongside Lone Star here, looks like it might be a much stronger one competitively here. It's a crime drama. It's based on a Argentinian show that's essentially the same idea. And it sounds, from what I can gather, almost like something like Good Girls on NBC, where it's about like this hardworking, mom of sorts that does as much as she can for her family, but then is going to go to some extremes to help them out because they're struggling financially of sorts. So it's going to have some of those elements to it. Crime dramas in general, at this point, you could argue are a little bit played out or a little bit stereotypical in terms of some of the elements that they include for it. Some of the plot twists, quote unquote, have become a little bit cliche overall. But this one seems like it's doing enough to set itself apart and will probably be a pretty big hit in terms of the core kind of fan base that love crime dramas will really, gravitate towards this because it's something kind of original compared to a lot of the other ones. But if you're not really big on them, it's probably not going to be a show for you in that case. Oliver Hudson, I noticed the other day, is set to star in this as well, and I know him from Rules of Engagement, one of my favorite comedies, so that'll be pretty interesting to see. And then Lone Star, like I said, I'll be watching, so this might be one that I check out. I was originally thinking about watching The Big Leap, but I just heard, it just wasn't really going to be in the style that I was too familiar with, or that I was too, it just wasn't really for me, so I decided not to check it out, but The Clean Lady definitely sounds like a little bit more interesting. So I think Fox, again, has a pretty solid lineup there for their winter schedule. For NBC here, they have a bit of a mixed bag here, not going to lie. NBC for sure was the strongest out of the gate here with their fall lineup. I thought they had the best overall for the fall, and they definitely proven that. They are the top rated for overall networks from all the major news outlets. They are reporting that NBC is doing the best right now. But for their winter lineup here, this is a bit disappointing for them. Definitely a bunch of shows here that sound pretty interesting, but don't really have any synergy with one another. Don't really seem to have a lot of chemistry here. So for now, to ride out the holiday season, they're just doing a bunch of like one-off specials at 10, so that's kind of insignificant, nothing really interesting there to talk about. But then come winter in January, they're gonna debut a brand new show at 9 here called That's My Jam, following their season 2 for Kenan here. So as we pull this up here. Kenan, a really, really solid sitcom from last year with Kenan Thompson from SNL. You probably know him from. I love Kenan Thompson personally. SNL, of course, one of my favorites. It also features another actor from SNL named Chris Redd, who's hilarious on the show. So that was really, really cool to see him on the show as well. I've seen a few episodes of this. Definitely worth checking out if you like any of those actors there. But That's My Jam, on the other hand. This sounds like a really interesting show, not necessarily for the best reasons here. This kind of reminds me of Lip Sync Battle, weirdly enough, which is a cable show with Chrissy Teigen and someone else. I think it's LL Cool J actually is on that show, if I'm remembering correctly. But that's like just a kind of a silly, fun game show of sorts that feature celebrities lip syncing to popular songs, and that was a Jimmy Fallon produced show. This is also Jimmy Fallon. He's going to be the host of this show. And it sounds very similar in that, where they're just going to have a bunch of celebrities just kind of come up and either sing or do like karaoke type stuff to popular songs. And it just be like kind of a fun, family type show, just, to have a good time with, not something that you're supposed to take super seriously. The first episode, as you can see there, is going to feature the cast of The Voice right now, which is Ariana Grande, Blake Shelton, Kelly Clarkson, and John Legend there, who are all obviously huge. So that'll be a strong start for it in terms of just, again, star power and name recognition. Of course, Jimmy Fallon's a massive figure for NBC right now doing The Tonight Show. So that sounds like it will have its audience for sure, but I just don't know how well that's going to play alongside Kenan or Ordinary Joe, which is going to come back after the hiatus of the kind of one-off holiday specials that they currently are airing at the moment. And then following that, in February, they also have this other singing competition type show called American Song Contest, which is essentially just an adaptation of Eurovision, which, if you're not familiar, is a massive, massive competition over in Europe there, essentially getting all the best talent from all over the continent to come together. And it's a big, week-long competition festival they do annually. It's a massive thing over there, and it's produced some pretty big names over the years over in Europe. These unknowns that come on and get their opportunity to perform all over the world, essentially, through Eurovision. And that is what this is going to be, but instead of Europe, it's going to be in America here. So it's going to see contestants from all over, all 50 states and DC, and they're going to come together and they're going to have this big old music competition. So it sounds like it'll be a good idea. 2 hours, very similar to The Voice, so that'll definitely help it be marketable and be accessible to a lot of people. My only concern is when they do these sort of adaptations, sometimes it gets bastardized based on how American TV kind of compares to international TV in some way. That happens a lot, vice versa, when they try to adapt an American show to an international audience. They have to modify or change some things to make it, a little bit more traditional on how an international audience would view it. And that can happen if you do the reverse of it too. So some of the more subliminal, nuances of Eurovision might get kind of undermined or kind of, lost in translation, if you will, when it gets brought here to the US. So that's my one concern here. But if you're a fan of those types of shows, or just, singing competitions like American Idol or The Voice or something like that, I think that'll be a really fun one to check out. And then that is going to lead in for the end game here. Similar to Promised Land here, these 10 o'clock dramas at the moment just don't really have a lot of information on them. Don't really know what this is, or what it's about or anything, what genre it's in. So we'll just have to wait and see on those. But that is going to basically overtake Ordinary Joe for the rest of the season into the spring there. So for Monday, it's definitely tough to pick what network is going to be the best, because you could definitely argue ABC with football is going to be huge for them. You could argue CW probably has the best chemistry between their shows with the All-Americans. I think the most potential comes from Fox or NBC with some of their new shows. But honestly, I think CBS right now, is going to take it. Big Brother, like I said, isn't really for me. That's going to be a weird lead-in for NCIS. But when it comes back to the original and it's just kind of mimicking what the fall schedule is, I think that is going to be the best overall here for Monday nights. All right, let's move on to Tuesday here. Tuesday is another one that is a little bit of a mixed bag here. Definitely some good, some bad, and some in between here. So let's break it down. With ABC, right now they're doing The Bachelorette, as we talked about earlier, and then their new show, Queens, which Queens is definitely a show that I would have not expected them to keep on the schedule, right? They're doubling down here for the winter. They're going to keep that in the 10 o'clock slot. Everything that I've heard about it is that the show itself is really good, but it's very niche in terms of the demographics it's going after because it's an all black cast. It's very kind of steeped in this, 90s hip hop culture, 90s R&B culture, and current, TV viewers and current, network audiences, they're just not really fitted for that type of show, right? They just don't really fit in those demographics all that much. And it's unfortunate because even though it's getting, critical acclaims and all this, great positive reception behind it, viewership wise, it is struggling majorly here with an average of only about 1.5 million to 1.75 million viewers an episode, which for ABC is practically a new low for them. It's definitely one of the weakest premieres we've seen in a very, very long time. You could attest that definitely to the fact that it was delayed compared to some of the other dramas that it's competing against, specifically Most Wanted, their FBI, and New Amsterdam, which are both more established dramas that have had seasons prior to kind of foundate and base themselves off of. But Queens is brand new. It's a new IP. It's very original content, so it's going to have a harder time competing there. But the other thing that's interesting about this show is to help promote it, because ABC knew there was a lot of potential here. Was a few weeks ago they broadcasted a 2-hour special taking a look at behind the scenes for this show, interviews with the cast, the production, the writers, directors, the creators, all this stuff to kind of help promote and give an inside look into what this show is all about, to kind of drum up some buzz and some hype surrounding it. And when that aired on Monday night, the following day, they aired a new episode. And despite the special doing really well, doubling where the original traditionally is with about 3.5 million viewers, the new episode was back down to its average mark of about 1.5 million. So despite ABC's best efforts, they are just not getting results for this show. And it's unfortunate because it looks like it could be really, really interesting. Has kind of a similar tone and storyline to something like Empire or Star that was big on Fox a couple years ago, but this one just not really doing them much justice here. So that's unfortunate, but they're going to keep at it here. They're going to stick at it out for the winter here. So we'll see how that plays into it. I think their lead-ins for it are definitely stronger than The Bachelorette here, with this new show Abbott Elementary and then Blackish here with its final season at 9 and 9:30. And then we're not really sure yet what is going to take that 8 o'clock slot. That could definitely throw a wrench in it as well if that's just not the best show. But I want to talk for a minute about Abbott Elementary, because this is, I think, the big ABC sitcom that they were looking for a while here. Something to kind of take all the best elements of shows that they've had prior and throw them all together. This is going to be a single camera mockumentary type show, very similar to something like Modern Family. It's going to be a great workplace comedy, something like The Office or Parks and Rec. Also, those mockumentary workplace comedies were huge on network TV not too long ago. And it's also going to be primarily an African American cast, so pairing it with something like Blackish as well, which was a huge show for that demographic as well a few years back. Pairing all of those elements together and making it as good as it can possibly be, this looks like a fantastic return to form for ABC comedies here, and I am super excited to check it out for myself. I've seen a couple trailers and a couple interviews with the cast and stuff. One of the leads on this show is going to be Tyler James Williams, who you might know from Everybody Hates Chris, which is another fantastic black African-American sitcom from back in the early 2000s. He really made his name through there. He's just a great actor in general. He's also been on like The Walking Dead and stuff, so he's had a ton of TV experience over the years, and this is another brand new show that he can make his name on. So very, very much looking forward to checking that out as well. My only concern with it, frankly, is where they've placed it on the schedule. I think that would have been a so much better one to have on ABC Wednesday alongside the Goldbergs and the Connors, instead of what they ended up getting, which was the Wonder Years here, and then just kind of throwing this and saving it for Tuesday, which I don't think was the best move on their end. But hopefully it'll be big enough and good enough to give ABC a little bit of hope here for their comedies, and maybe inspire them to do some more out of the box thinking for the next couple of years there, because I really want to see them get back to the good old days when they had a massive lineup of sitcoms here, and they had 2 full days on the schedule dedicated to them, and all the shows were fantastic. And this might be the beginning of a new chapter of that for them. So let's hope for this one. I'm definitely going to be checking it out for myself here when it comes to the winter lineup. For CBS here, they are sticking with the FBI as you would expect. Absolutely massive for them. Really no explanation needed here. The FBI's are fantastic. Dick Wolf, of course. Me and my mom tend to watch these week to week, which is really, really fun. I love the original, and her favorite is Most Wanted, so a little bit of a variety for everyone there. Really, really great pairing of shows there for Tuesday. For the CW, right now they have The Flash and Riverdale. We saw Riverdale earlier is going to move to Sundays eventually, and The Flash is actually going to be moving to Wednesdays in the spring as well. We'll get to that in just a minute here. But for the winter, we have 2 other superhero shows. We have Superman and Lois, which was a massive premiere for them. I was reading the other day that when that premiered back last year, it was around 2 million viewers, which is huge for the CW, of course, because if they, if any of their shows get over 1 million, that's massive for them. So to get nearly 2 million is, like out of this world for the CW. And of course, being Superman, one of the most iconic superheroes and comic book characters of all time, you would expect that it would do massive numbers there. Critically, it's a great show too. A couple close friends of mine and co-workers that I know really, really enjoyed this show. Shout out to Gabe. But yeah, absolutely a massive hit from the CW there. And then this other new show called Naomi, which is based on the character of Naomi McDuffie, which is a comic book series based on DC as well. I am not super familiar with these characters. I'm not really a superhero guy or a comic book guy, so someone in the comments can fill me in if this is a justified idea for a show, if this character has a big enough fan base to be able to compete with some of these other larger dramas here, how well it pairs with Superman. If anyone wants to fill us in the comments, that would be awesome. Compared to the ones that they had earlier in the fall, The Flash and Riverdale, both of these are fresh ideas. They're newer shows, so they have a lot more room to expand and to get bigger, in the next couple of months here. Both The Flash and Riverdale, they're definitely very established shows, both being on the network for at least like 6, 7, 8 years each now. But in part due to that, they are kind of tiring out, and they're just not really hitting the same peaks they once were. A lot of the storylines are getting kind of convoluted and kind of messy, which is what happens with these dramas that extend themselves for so long here. So it might be pretty soon before we see the end of either one of these. Maybe The Flash will go first because that is the one that's been on for longer. And then just for something like Superman to come and take its place, I think is a great idea. So the CW, I think, is going to have a much stronger TV presence here come winter on Tuesday. For Fox here, we have The Resident, huge medical drama. Even despite the exit of Emily Van Camp, which was a pretty big thing in regards to the show and its fan base, if people were going to stick around for it. I know my girlfriend, who was originally watching it because she was a big fan of hers, has seen all her shows, kind of stopped watching it a little bit because of her exit, at least not supporting it in terms of watching it live. She caught back up with it on streaming, but did agree that it did hurt the show a little bit in terms of its quality. But for some other people, it's, hasn't really affected it. So just kind of one of those, 50-50 things within the fan base. But either way, it was definitely still a much stronger show than Our Kind of People, which followed it up at 9 there. This was another example very similar to The Big Leap, which was very much just kind of disappointing for Fox. Had the great lead in from one of their most popular dramas that should have carried over a lot more viewers than it did. And the storyline was just not really there critically. It was definitely one of the weakest reviewed, both on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb. So Fox definitely needed to get rid of this show as quick as possible and kind of broom it and put something else in that slot. So come February, that is what they will be doing with the new drama Monarch here. The best way I can describe this show from what I have gathered from it, based on a couple promos that I've seen, is it essentially looks like it's going to be Empire meets Nashville. So a very, very like heavily dramatized, with a lot of story, a lot of characters, a lot of rich kind of dialogue in there as well. That's going to basically take the idea of Empire, which is focused on the drama and the family surrounding this big superstar, rap kind of industry, but pairing that with Nashville in the sense that it's going to be based on country music as opposed to like hip hop. So that'll be a very different kind of demographic it'll bring in, but still looks pretty interesting based on what I've seen. Maybe not something that I myself am going to check out, but if you like those types of really like heavily dramatized, serialized storylines, kind of has like a soap opera almost feel to it as well, which I know is going to be a big draw for certain people, then that'll be a really good show to check out. So not sure how well it's going to play with The Resident in terms of their chemistry with one another. Probably doesn't have the best kind of reach in terms of getting the same demographics and whatnot, but either way, I think that'll be a much better show than Our Kind of People, at least. So looking forward to seeing what that can do as well. And then finally with NBC here, oh boy, NBC, definitely another mixed bag here. To start off though, in the fall, we had the lineup that looked like The Voice, La Brea, and New Amsterdam. And we knew that The Voice and New Amsterdam were definitely going to be the big draws for these, and both of them doing just fine here for this current season. But with La Brea, that was a brand new show. We had no expectations for it, really didn't know what it was about. Essentially, we didn't really have a lot of information on it. We knew that it was a sci-fi mystery type of show, but outside of that, didn't really know much else in terms of its characters or story arcs or what it was based on or anything like that. Until it started airing, and it was the surprise hit of the season here, becoming the biggest new rated show for the 18 to 49 demo here. So that got a lot of people looking at it, checking it out here. Sci-fi fans gravitated towards this immediately, absolutely fell in love with it, and it is the first brand new season show that actually got its season 2 renewal already, which is fantastic for it. That definitely got me very interested in checking it out for myself here to kind of see what all the buzz was about. So that is definitely something I'm going to do very soon here in preparation for season 2, which probably won't be airing until at least fall of 2022. Most likely, and that's actually something else that leads into a different point here that we'll talk about a little bit later when we get to the Wednesday lineup, which is traditionally when the new shows of a certain season do well and they air a few episodes and it turns out they're a big hit, they will usually extend the season, and instead of it taking a hiatus or something, it'll go throughout the winter and throughout the spring, and it'll get like a 24 episode order or 22 episode order or something like that. La Brea, on the other hand, it was only set to do 10 episodes originally, and then at that point see if it was a success or not. Turns out it was, and you'd think that they would extend it for the rest of the season, but then they just decided to renew it instead. So that was a little bit interesting on behalf of NBC there, sort of their strategy for it. But now it makes sense looking at the winter schedule, because replacing that is going to be This Is Us here, and that makes perfect sense because the 9 o'clock Tuesday schedule is exactly where it's been for the past 6 years now. This will be its final season, so it'll go out on a high note there, and that's going to be a massive hit for them as well. kind of sandwiched in between this group of sitcoms at the beginning, and then this brand new show as well at 10 o'clock, and then New Amsterdam as well. Let's start with the sitcoms here. For winter, we have American Auto and Grand Crew. These are both brand new for the season here. And as much as I hate to say this because I am a sitcom guy, and I think NBC in the past has had obviously huge success with sitcoms, with their 2000 sitcoms, and even further back then with the 90s stuff, of course, like Seinfeld, Friends, all that good stuff. In the last few years, they have certainly not had the best luck with them in terms of just getting people interested. That's really been their biggest kind of fault with their comedies lately, and both of these, as you can tell, they don't even have Wikipedia pages or anything. To me, the way that NBC has treated both of these shows in giving out like press releases and giving out information for these, more than any other that we've seen so far for the 2021 schedule, seem like they don't even have faith in these shows doing well. They're just putting them up there to kind of fill in the schedule for the winter, just to get to their more established shows later in the spring there, which will be Young Rock and Mr. Mayor, both from last year that did really well with some big name recognition on those. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on Young Rock, and then Ted Danson on Mr. Mayor there. These newer shows having unknowns, not really any star power behind them. Some people are talking about American Auto, at least in the sense that it's a different sort of element, it's a different sort of environment for a sitcom to take place in, which will be like a mechanic shop. It'll be like a workplace comedy. But Grand Crew is just going to be like a stupid like rom-com sort of show, kind of like Undateable. It's going to have like very cliched characters and stuff, and both of them, from what I gather, are multi-camera laugh track style sitcoms, which again is something that nobody in 2021 is interested in. Young Rock and Mr. Mayor are single camera, and they're more traditional in that sense. So it's unfortunate because I think personally, as a massive fan of sitcoms and comedy being my number one favorite genre, that there's still a lot of potential in the genre for there to be really unique and really exciting shows, even on network TV, even if they stick with the cliches, like we just talked about with Abbott Elementary. That show is taking from all the best that we've seen prior to it, even though it does have a lot of familiar elements to it. It's using them in a very unique and original way compared to a lot of these new ones. So there's still a lot of room for comedies to do well in the current landscape of television, but these networks are just so stubborn in sticking with traditional styles that people have been very vocal for years now do not work. So that is my one criticism with NBC, especially with this, is that both of these shows just seem like complete filler. They're going to be, canceled by the end of the year, and they're not going to be remembered or anything. They're probably not going to have good critical reviews. It just seems like a waste for such a, legacy, sort of genre that sitcoms hold within the NBC landscape there. So that's my comments on it. But maybe you might disagree. So anything you have to say on those, I'd love to read in the comments there. And then let's quickly talk about as well The Thing About Pam, which is their new crime drama here that's going to bookend the night here at 10 o'clock. This is actually based on a true story of convicted murderer Pam Hupp, who in 2011 was charged with murder of, I think, like her neighbors or some close friends of hers or something like that. It's been a pretty big story for a few years now. It's gotten a lot of kind of buzz on true crime podcasts and sort of like news, like cable news type stuff. That's a lot of where the kind of hype surrounding the story has originated from. And there's currently a movie in place for like a big production to tell the story, and there's also a TV show now about it, which is this one, The Thing About Pam. The thing that jumped out to me as soon as I started reading up on this was the cast list for this show. Big cast, huge star power with this one, with Renee Zellweger, Josh Duhamel, Judy Greer, Katie Mixon, all big names here from TV that have done multiple projects and movies and all sorts of good stuff like that. This feels like something that could be on like an HBO even, because it's going to be very cinematic. It's going to be very dark and very kind of atmospheric with this very sensitive, kind of thriller type topic, which I think is going to be really cool. It's a limited series, so it's not going to necessarily require huge ratings or anything because it's not expected to go on for season 2. So I think that's a really good idea to kind of fill in for this gap where New Amsterdam is taking this hiatus and as a lead out for This Is Us, because if they can get a lot of people interested in This Is Us, it's the final season, then this could work really well in their favor to kind of hype up this limited series. So I think that's a really good idea on their end for the Tuesday schedule. So overall here, I would say still, even in spite of all the new shows and all the interesting ones like Abbott Elementary, The Thing About Pam, I would still give it to CBS here. I think the traditional, 3 really, really solid, really well-made shows that all, have good chemistry with one another, all in the same franchise. That strategy is bulletproof, really, in 2021, and CBS knows it with these FBI shows. They are absolutely dominating right now. And even though I do think there are a couple, like I said, that could take away certain demographics or kind of pop up as surprise hits, like something like Abbott Elementary, hopefully. I don't think it's going to be enough to dethrone CBS right now for the Tuesday lineup. All right, going into Wednesday now. Now, I have talked quite a bit about the Wednesday lineup for all of the networks over the last few podcasts here when we've looked at the Nielsen ratings. Wednesday is definitely the most talked about and the most competitive day so far for the 2021 season. And there's one network in particular that a lot of people have been commenting on and speculating and really putting under the microscope with every little decision that they've made, and that is ABC here with their lineup of sitcoms here. So you have the Goldbergs, the Wonder Years, the Connors, and Home Economics. They're doubling down on all these. 2 of them I think make sense, those being the Goldbergs and the Connors. They're the highest rated ones. They're the biggest when it comes to fanfare, most established ones in terms of previous seasons. So those I think are fine. The Wonder Years and Home Economics, what I was saying about La Brea, where they get their full season orders after the fact, both of these shows ended up getting that. I think they were only slated for about 8 episodes originally, and then they extended it to a full 22. So that's why you can see they are taking over the winter schedule as well. They're not getting replaced with anything because they now all have their full season orders here. The only one that doesn't is A Million Little Things at 10, which is getting replaced with The Chase here, which is another one that kind of falls under the game show lineup for ABC, like Wheel of Fortune or something like that. I believe it was on GSN originally, actually, when they brought it back. I think it was a really kind of older game show for a while, or was adapted in some way, and then they brought it to GSN for a little while, and now it's on ABC. So this show in its lifespan has had a lot of different iterations and has had a lot of different additions throughout it, but the ABC version seems like it was a good enough show, kind of stayed true to the show's roots and had a very traditional format. Currently, it has some of the folks from Jeopardy on it, like Ken Jennings and James Holzhauer, that were really, really, famous on Jeopardy for just being absolutely dominant on the show. And so they have some of them as contestants or competitors or something like that. I'm not really too familiar with it, but if you like game shows and stuff, this is obviously a good one to check out here. I think it would make more sense if it was put on the Sunday lineup or something like that, if they wanted to maybe change out The Rookie for a little while and have it on there alongside Wheel of Fortune and Supermarket Sweep, or even just save it till the summer, put it with Family Feud or something. As a mid-season replacement in the winter here is kind of odd. It just seems like filler to me. But what's even weirder about it, I was reading the other day, was this season that's set to premiere in January is not actually season 3, but it's the second half of season 2. So they had, X amount of episodes from season 2. The first portion of it aired in September of 2020, and then they took a hiatus from it and they had a bunch of other shows, and now that second half of episodes is airing here in the winter of 2021 into 2022, which is really weird and confusing. So yeah, that was just kind of bizarre to me when I was like reading up on that, like why they would split the season and stuff like that. I don't know what ABC's thinking with that in terms of their like marketing decisions and everything, but all I know is that if that does help them in some way, hopefully it does do better than A Million Little Things, because that show is just getting eaten alive from the competition, specifically with Chicago PD and CSI Vegas here, which we'll talk about in just a sec. But going back to the sitcoms for a minute, I just don't see why the Wonder Years and Home Economics are equally getting the same treatment as the Goldbergs and the Connors, because they're just not performing the same way. We've seen that in previous podcast episodes. The numbers clearly dictate that people are tuning in for the Goldbergs, then switching off for the Wonder Years because they don't want to watch it. It's just too political for them. They're just not interested in seeing that storyline. Then coming back for the Connors and then switching off again after that's done because they don't want to watch Home Economics. So it's like very clear that there just isn't any synergy between these shows. And ABC, again, is super stubborn, just like NBC, where they're just not listening to what these numbers are telling us, what the fans are saying online, on IMDb, or on social media about these shows, that they're just not interested in. They want to see original new content come out. And to double down like this, I think is just really, really kind of, barbaric even for them, because they are really, really close to losing a lot of what made ABC Wednesday so great before, even just a few years ago. And to see it, go down like this is really disappointing as a sitcom fan. So definitely not helping them out in any way here for winter. I think they're going to have a uphill battle for sure coming up in the next few months, especially compared to CBS here, which is looking to revamp their Wednesday lineup here with Big Brother as well. We saw that before. So it's going to be on Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday here. So 3 separate days for Big Brother. And then Survivor, when we come back to the spring here, we're going to see the second season of Survivor for this TV season. That's usually how they do it, 2 per. Then we have The Amazing Race in here as well. Another one of their big, long time running reality competitions. Of all of them that we've talked about so far, Survivor, Big Brother, Tough as Nails, you see there, The Amazing Race is definitely my favorite. There was a period where that was probably my favorite competition show on TV. I was really, really stern and like religious about watching that. Absolutely love that show. It was a really awesome concept to see them go all over the world and compete in these different countries and all these little challenges they had. It actually felt like there was some real energy and urgency with this show compared to something like Survivor, because they were actually racing, each other to get through all these challenges. So there was, a sense of competition there. So that's really cool that they're bringing it back. That was the only show that they didn't have for a while. I don't think they aired it at all in 2020 or 2021 because of COVID, and that makes sense because that would have been the hardest to produce because they're going all over the world. So they would have had a lot more challenges to produce something like that than Survivor, where they could knock out a few quick seasons to kind of fill in the gaps there. But I'm glad it's back there. I don't know if I'll be checking it out because there's some other shows that I want to watch instead that are competing against it. But one show that I will be checking out, regardless of if I watch it on TV or catch it on streaming later, is this 10 o'clock drama called The Good Sam here. This show looks really, really cool to me. And you might not even expect it because as soon as I say the words medical drama, a lot of you are going to tune out of it, which I completely understand. I myself am not the biggest fan of medical dramas by any means here, but this show looks like one that I think might change my perception on it. And the main reason why, frankly, is due to its lead actress here, Sophia Bush, who is one of my favorites on TV. Got her start way back in the day, back in 2003 with One Tree Hill, great sports drama. Moved on to Chicago PD, which is where I know her from, great police procedural show. And then now is doing the Holy Trinity to round those out with Good Sam here, which is a medical drama here. You can see there it is premiering on the 5th alongside The Chase, so it's going to be one of the newest shows of 2022. And I'm not sure yet exactly if Chicago PD is going to be up from its hiatus in time to compete against the premiere of that show. So the deal is with the Chicagos right now, so we'll jump to NBC here. They're going to just stick with those throughout the rest of the season, which makes total sense. And that is primarily what I'm going to be watching, so that's why I'm saying Amazing Race probably won't be able to check that out in direct competition with it. But as of now, as I record this, they actually are on hiatus throughout the Thanksgiving season and the couple weeks leading up to that. And then for their mid-season finale, they're going to premiere that on the 8th of December. And then they're going to take another hiatus throughout the Christmas season and the New Year's. So it's possible they might just barely be back in time to compete against the premiere of Good Sam. If they're not, then I will be watching that and seeing, that live when it premieres on the 5th. If so, then I'll catch it on streaming later and just, see how I like it there. But it is really interesting, ironically, that's the show it's going up against because PD is, like I said, where Sophia Bush made her name from. But I know a lot of people that were watching it specifically for her did jump ship when she left the show, and then it's, she's not on it anymore, obviously. So it'll be interesting to see her core fan base, which one they decide to go to, because this show definitely has a lot of promise behind it. Definitely better than Vegas, surprisingly, even because CSI Vegas, in spite of all the great marketing and all of the hype that it had as, CSI coming back to TV, doing a very traditional sense of it, going back to its roots, of course, that unfortunately was kind of hindered by the schedule that it was brought up with Tough as Nails as the lead-in, which really kind of undermined a lot of the potential success that it would have had there, because that show just does not really interest anybody, unfortunately. CBS is trying to make this a big hit. This is not really happening, but somehow it got its season 4 order, so what do I know? But Vegas right now still definitely has a good fanfare behind it. All of the reviews on IMDb and stuff like that have been really positive, so that's a good sign. But that is stopping for now, in favor of Good Sam. It seems like it has a little bit more of a potential there to bring in a bigger audience. Medical dramas, of course, are big, so smart play on CBS there. And then, like I said, we'll have to see how it competes against PD there at 10 o'clock. Let's quickly do the CW and Fox here, and then we'll round out Wednesday. The CW is going to be putting The Flash in the spring there, as you can see, like we said earlier, and then Kung Fu as well. That's another remake that premiered last year. It's based on an old 1970s show. That's probably their least recognizable show. They're definitely the least recognizable reboot of any of these that have been premiered either last year or this year. The Flash, of course, is big, so hopefully that'll help booster some of the ratings there. But CW, honestly, Wednesday has always just kind of been a little lackluster in comparison to everything else because, compared to shows like Survivor or The Chicagos or even something like The Masked Singer, those are all really, really big and have their very, very diehard fan bases. So it's hard to compete against those, but honestly, if they take a little bit of a loss here, CW is doing really well everywhere else, so one day is not really going to be the end of them by any means. And then Fox here, they're doubling down on the unscripted reality shows as well. They're doing I Can See Your Voice and this new one called Next Level Chef. I assume that's a cooking show based on the title, but that's another one that just got announced. We don't really have a lot of info on it yet. I Can See Your Voice was a show that they premiered last year during COVID as kind of filler, and it was very similar to the Name That Tune show they did with who was the host of that? It was someone like Wayne Brady or someone like that. They had a few shows during that span of they were just kind of making filler to produce during COVID that was cheap, and they had a bunch of these weird gimmicky singing music type shows, and that was one of them. And it seemed to be a big enough hit that it got a season 2. So again, Fox here, they're doing well enough everywhere else that they don't really need to compete on Wednesday against a juggernaut like the Chicagos or something. So that's totally fine. But Yeah, if you couldn't already tell, I think NBC is still going to be dominating here. CBS is certainly going to have a lot of competitive shows, but it really depends on quality. Good Sam is really the biggest wild card right now, but I am definitely very curious about it myself. And again, it's not in a genre that I would typically watch, so that's a good sign for it, frankly. So Wednesday is definitely going to be a lot of fun to see how it all competes in the next few months. All right, going into Thursday here. Thursday was my most anticipated day of the year because when in the fall, we'll start with NBC this time. We had the Law and Order shows here, and you might have noticed that they had a little bit of a different schedule than what we saw earlier in that first podcast episode here. There was originally supposed to be a different Law and Order show that was supposed to premiere at 8 o'clock called For the Defense, which would have been a series focusing more on the criminal side of things and on the defense lawyers and that kind of aspect of the Law and Order canon, if you will, which has never had a dedicated series to kind of expand on that element of the franchise. So that would have been a really cool idea, but unfortunately, timing wise, it just wasn't going to work. They had a lot of other shows on their schedule, and that ended up getting replaced because they just didn't have enough funds or resources to really make it work. And it was actually pulled in favor of a different Law and Order show, which is still in production right now, which is set to premiere on Peacock at some point in 2022. So instead, what happened was they were putting in reruns for SVU for a while. They actually had 2-hour blocks of SVU towards the beginning. And then a couple weeks where they did a 1.5 hour for SVU and 1.5 hour for organized crime. So they were just playing for like the first month or so with those two shows and just kind of filling up the schedule, which was cool because we got new episodes that were extended and they were awesome at the beginning. So that was really cool. And then they started doing reruns of it, which was, fine for the time being. But then it was announced that the Blacklist was going to be moving from Friday into Thursday here to kind of fill the gap on this Thursday night lineup, and then a different show, which we'll talk about in a minute, replaced that on Friday. So they had to do some rearranging because one show they decided to scrap there. So it was a little bit hectic for a while, but it ended up being stable. The Blacklist, surprisingly enough, did not really do as much as I think people were hoping for. I like the Blacklist. I've seen a few episodes here and there. I think James Spader is awesome on the show, but it is really embedded in that Friday night lineup in competition with some of the CBS dramas like MacGyver and then Blue Bloods and stuff like that. Not so much with the like Shonda Rhimes on ABC, and doesn't really pair as well with the Law and Order shows. But they ended up just putting it in there for the time being. It was the lowest rated for any of the NBC shows, but the Law and Orders obviously are huge enough that those can stand on their own, so it wasn't really that big of a deal. But the big event show of next year of 2022, which I am so excited for, this is probably my most anticipated show of the year, is the return of the original Law and Order from back in 1990 here. The one that started it all for 20 seasons, 2 decades, ladies and gentlemen. From 1990 to 2010, the original Law and Order was on for, and it was a dominant show, not only in the drama category, but just, network TV in general. Super influential, was always one of the highest rated, of course, launched all the spin-offs we know to this day. And it was announced just a few months ago, actually, that they were bringing it back here for season 21. So, season 21, yes, you heard that right. So, it is not technically a new show. It is just an extension of the original. If you go to this link here, it just redirects you to the original Wikipedia page for it. But you can see if you scroll down to where its original releases, it is now to present here, which is really cool to see. Dick Wolf is coming back as an executive producer. I plan on making follow-up either episodes to the podcast or separate videos talking more in detail about Law and Order when it eventually airs. So I don't want to talk about it too much now, because I don't want to risk getting anything wrong if it ends up being different than what we are suspecting, but for now, I am super excited for it. I've heard some rumors about who potentially is going to be on the cast, and some of them are really, really exciting. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so a few more months away. But yes, I am definitely super, super, super excited to check that out. I think that's going to be massive for NBC. There, probably the most dominant schedule for the winter lineup here. But we'll run through the others. We'll go up top to ABC here. They started off with the Shonda Rhimes show, Station 19, Grey's Anatomy, and then Big Sky as their lead off there. Big Sky was a really good show at the beginning. I kind of fell off of it because I didn't really like the direction that season 1 towards the end had. But season 2, I hear, is really good. It kind of goes back to its roots as just a simple murder mystery type show. So I might have to check that out and get caught back up with it. But ratings wise, it definitely wasn't able to capture the same sort of numbers as the Shonda Rhimes shows, especially Grey's Anatomy, as that's the biggest one of them. So that was kind of disappointing for it. It definitely could have been a little bit stronger there. It did have some steady competition against Organized Crime, of course, as well, with its great lead-in from SVU, but that was still kind of definitely a disappointing result for Big Sky. But for winter here, they are premiering this mini-series called Women of the Movement here. This is going to be a historical drama. It's supposed to be a limited series again, so it's not going to have most likely a season 2, so just kind of filler for the winter season, but still should be a pretty good one here. Supposed to take place during the segregated South, in the late 50s, early 60s there during the Civil Rights Movement. I'm not sure if it's based on a true story or not. Someone could fill me in there in the comments, but either way, that's definitely a very, relatable and kind of, topical sort of interest in the current day landscape of politics. Hopefully it'll be a better kind of show that'll implement those kind of topics in a more palatable way than the Wonder Years does, but only time will tell. So I'll have to wait and see. That'll premiere in January, and then a TBA for the 10 o'clock slot. We'll just have to see what ABC decides there. For CBS, they are sticking with their sitcoms here, which really no surprise because those are doing just fine. Young Sheldon, United States of Al, Ghost, Be Positive, and then Bull as their 10 o'clock drama. Bull is the only one of those that is a little bit of a risky show right now in terms of its numbers. It's the most likely to be canceled of all of them, but compared to some of the other dramas that CBS has, they might choose a couple others to pull instead come spring. Bull is, I would argue, a more likely show to just go out on its own terms because I think this is season 7 now. So it's been on for quite some time, and I used to watch it. It's a pretty solid show. It was in the beginning, but for a while I just kind of stopped because there was just too much else that I was interested in. So I just never really got caught back up with it. But I would say like after this season, maybe they'll do a half or a limited season for 8 next year, and then they might wrap it up after that. So we'll just have to wait and see. But that's what the CBS lineup is doing for Thursday. The CW, same thing. They're just sticking with their fall lineup with Walker and Legacies, so nothing new to report there. And then for Fox, oh boy, let's talk about Fox. They probably have the worst lineup as far as like going from the best it could possibly been for the fall with Thursday Night Football. They were getting obviously great success with that, down to probably the worst lineup that we've seen so far. Just in terms of quality, because me personally, I would stay far the hell away from all of these shows that they have. The first one here is a remake of Joe Millionaire, which was a really obscure, like a really niche dating show back in the early 2000s, like 20 years ago this aired. And the whole gimmick was the person that they were competing against was a millionaire. So it was really like kind of shallow and really like now it just seems so dated, for something like that to be the concept of a show. But it was very popular back in the day. It was super popular. It was averaging around 30 million people an episode back when shows were able to get that. So I can see why they brought this back. I mean, shows like The Bachelor and The Bachelorette certainly have orchestrated and kind of presented themselves that those dating shows certainly have an audience and they can be sustainable for many, many years. But why they would pick that one of all, like, that just seems like a weird idea to me. And in addition to that, they are putting it on the schedule with two of the worst sitcoms in a very, very long time. One of them brand new called Pivoting, which, from what I can gather from the trailers, looks like just one of those shows that is on for like 6 weeks and then is gone forever and like nobody talks about. I think it's a show about like single moms or something, like getting back in their dating life. I really can't gather anything from it, frankly, because I just don't care, because it just doesn't look like a show that I would want to watch. But yeah, that just does not look good at all. And then the infamous Call Me Kat here, which was one of the worst reviewed shows of last year. I watched the pilot because I do like the actors on it. Like, of course, I like Mayim Bialik because she's from Big Bang Theory, and there was enough interest for the series in terms of like it adapting this British version and getting a lot of marketing and hype behind it that, I bought into it and I wanted to see, what that was about and stuff. And then I watched the pilot and then instantly knew that this was not a show that was going to do well at all in terms of its ratings. I think it has like a 20%, if even that, on Rotten Tomatoes. On IMDb, it's like in the 4s or 5s. Like, it's not good at all. And the outside of the pilot episode, all of the other ones were in like the 2 to 2.5 million, viewer range. So it wasn't really that big critically or commercially either. So I don't know why they chose to bring it back. Maybe based on name recognition. But outside of that, like, man, this is a really disappointing. This is like going from S tier all the way to bottom of the barrel, like, with that. So come January 6th, man, we're gonna have to avoid Fox like it. Oh man, like it's got Rona and every STD, because this is just not good, folks. So that is the Fox lineup there. But like I said earlier, NBC easily is going to take this one. Is absolutely going to take it with the Law and Orders there, no question about it. All right, let's quickly wrap up this. We got a couple more days to go over, the more insignificant, as they say, days, Friday and Saturday here, but we'll quickly go over these as well. ABC, they're going to just stick with their lineup here, Shark Tank in 2020. That's totally fine. I like Shark Tank, like I said earlier, so, that works for me. For CBS, they are actually bringing back Undercover Boss here, which is really cool. I like Undercover Boss a lot. I think that show really gets swept under the rug a lot, which is kind of disappointing because it's a very unique concept, and it's really one of those shows that I think only could work in this modern day era, because if this was made like back in the 80s or back in the 90s, I don't think it would have been as big of a success, because it wouldn't be as relevant in the current day landscape. When it premiered back in like 2008, that was right after the financial crisis and the housing crisis and stuff. So it was a very relevant show at the time, which is to see these large CEOs of these massive corporations and companies kind of go in undercover and work what a traditional or general employee of their company would be doing. So if it's like a fast food, CEO, they're on the line, making burgers and doing dishes and everything. And it's kind of funny to see these hoity-toity, $7 million or, 7-figure salary CEOs get these, really low-paying positions and see how they do with it. It's a really interesting kind of concept. So I'm glad they're bringing that back. They've done some gimmicky episodes here and there. Like they had one, it was like Celebrity Undercover Boss, and it would cast people like Darius Rucker was on one of them, and from Hootie and the Blowfish, and his was like he'd go to like an open mic night and see if there was any like untapped talent in the singing world or something, and sign somebody. So there was like some gimmicky stuff like that, but the core show I always enjoyed. So that's cool that they're bringing that back. We have another celebrity Big Brother as well in there, so that's 4 days now for Big Brother. So boy, if you're a Big Brother fan, man, you're going to be glued to your TV. And then we have Magnum PI, and then Blue Bloods is going to stick it out. So those totally fine. SWAT actually was on Friday, I forgot to mention as well. So that's moving to Sunday now. So we'll see how that does. I think either way, that's totally fine. They're pairing it with other big action dramas, and they're kind of transitioning away from that on Fridays for the remainder of the seasons with these more reality shows. So I think that's a totally fine transition for CBS there. For the CW here, this was an interesting one for fall on Friday. They had Penn and Teller Fool Us, and they had Nancy Drew here. Nancy Drew, man, that's unfortunate what happened to this show, because season 1 was really good. I saw a few episodes. I really liked it. Good murder mystery show. Very CW-like in that sense, like very similar to shows like Riverdale and stuff, but it was gimmicky enough, and it was fun, and it had some charm to it that you could, kind of give it a pass, and that it was just kind of a turn your brain off to sort of show. But from everything that I heard for season 2, it really went downhill really fast, and that basically translated to people just immediately jumping ship, because Friday nights, traditionally for TV is pretty much a dead zone. Like, if you get casted on Friday, it has to be a really established show, something like Blue Bloods or something, or it's just going to be something that doesn't really require like a big production or anything. But Nancy Drew is a big, atmospheric drama with a lot of action. So to completely uprip or undermine a lot of the good that it did from season 1, and then completely lose its audience was a really, really bad sign that the show is going downhill, of course. And as of now, it is the most likely CW show to get canceled at the end of this TV season, even in spite of the fact that it has a spinoff in the works. Yeah, so explain that to me. That's really weird. Yeah, that was announced a few months ago. But my argument for why it was like that was because it was paired with Penn and Teller Fool Us, which is a great show on its own, but had no chemistry whatsoever with Nancy Drew. And that was something I talked about at the very beginning. Both of these shows are really good, and they have their own separate fan bases, but they do not work together at all, especially on something like Friday. So that was a really weird move on the part of CW. They should have paired this with something like Riverdale. I think it would have been a much smarter move. So that's unfortunate what happened to Nancy Drew. But Penn and Teller is fine. But anyways, for the winter, they are completely uprooting these and completely changing the schedule here. They're going with Charmed and Dynasty here. Charmed is a remake, or kind of a reboot of the old 90s show from back in the day. It had enough interest, I think, within the CW landscape, because their demographic would certainly gravitate towards something like this, enough to where it works within the context of their channel, but not enough to really be bigger than outside of their core fan base, if that makes sense. Like, certain channels or certain networks just have certain shows like that only work on their network. They're not as accessible. They're not really mainstream enough to compete anywhere they would be put, and that would be an example of that. I know I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining that, but the core demographic will attach themselves to that show just fine, but it wouldn't really work anywhere else. So, if that makes sense. And then Dynasty afterwards, which is another show that kind of has that same problem. Dynasty is a show that I have always been interested in checking out because of the fact that it has a really interesting sort of record that it holds in itself, which is the fact that at the end of the TV season, when they rank every single, network show from top to bottom based on the Nielsen ratings. Dynasty is always in the bottom 5 shows, and you got to consider there's usually around like 175 to 200 shows, for the end of the season when you add everything up. And to be in the bottom 5 like that, like consistently from season 1 there, and be able to renew it for season 2 and season 3 and season 4, there's something about this show that the CW just absolutely loves, despite nobody else, attaching themselves to it. And the other thing that's interesting about this show is its star power and the fact that Elizabeth Gillies, you might recognize from Victorious, is the lead character on the show and is the lead actress. And there's really never been another example like that, at least in the CW's lane, where they have casted a really established TV actor from a different network or from a completely different era of TV onto one of their shows and it be as notable as this one is. Like, a lot of their TV actors are very unknowns. They're young teen actors. Elizabeth Gillies coming in, she was much older, she was much more experienced, and even with her help, this is still a really low tier rate show in terms of its ratings. So I always found that to be really interesting. I've always wanted to check it out to see why they keep renewing it. So even in spite of how bad the ratings are, which I'm not surprised because they always put it on Friday anyway, so I'm sure it's not going to be any better this year, but I wouldn't be surprised if it got a season 5 because it somehow manages to pull it off year after year after year like that. So really, really interesting stuff from the CW there. Not really anything again that I'm going to be checking out, at least for now, but still kind of interesting to see how that all comes together. Fox here, we have SmackDown again. They're just going to stick with that, so totally fine there. And then NBC here, like I said, originally we were supposed to see The Blacklist here at 8 o'clock. That ended up getting moved to Thursday, so they replaced it with this show called Home Sweet Home. Now, this show was pretty much dead on arrival, a lot of people were saying. They actually pulled this after 4 episodes. I think it was originally supposed to go till 10. And then they put the rest of them on Peacock, I heard the other day. So, yeah, you can see there, they did the first 4 on NBC, and then the rest got moved to Peacock there. And you can see the numbers. It was pretty clear why. This show was a last-minute replacement, didn't have any marketing behind it. The whole gimmick of it was essentially, it was basically a wife swap, but with, the whole family. So the whole idea was they'd pick a family that was very traditional in a certain culture or certain customs. They have certain living expectations. It's your traditional, American, middle class family or something. And then they pair them with someone who is Muslim, for instance, and they'd have different cultures or different traditions that they would practice in their day-to-day lives. And they would kind of adapt and see each other to kind of understand one another better on how all these different cultures and different ethnicities and different people live their lives through. So it had good intentions behind it, but the release and the marketing here, it was just too last minute. It was just too too rushed to really make this work. This doesn't really seem like the kind of show, honestly, that would be on a fall schedule anyway, if not for the circumstances surrounding what happened with The Blacklist. But I could have seen it on Peacock or something. That would have been a fine platform to have it on. I think that would have worked just as well there. But currently, once that got pulled, they put in The Wall. That's a really good show. That's a nice game show that was LeBron James produced, and Chris Hardwick hosts that. I've been a fan of that for a while now, so that's totally fine on Friday. And then we're not really sure what's going to happen in the winter yet, which is to be announced there. And then The Blacklist is going to come back once the original Law and Order takes its spot on Thursday. There, it'll be back in its place on Friday. So yeah, the Friday lineup is a little bit hit or miss here. I guess I would say CBS overall has the best lineup. ABC probably for what I would watch with Shark Tank I like. But like I said, nothing really here that's super vital. It's Friday, so this is just kind of all filler to some degree. Real quick, we'll end with Saturday here. For ABC, they're just doing their sports. They had the Saturday Night Football. It was college football. When the NBA, when basketball season starts in January, they're gonna show that in the winter, so that's cool. CBS has reruns of all their police procedural shows. CW has reruns of Whose Line Is It Anyway and World's Funniest Animals. They've been on that for a little while throughout the fall. Fox is doing football right now, and they'll just have various reruns and local stuff for the winter. A few to be announced here because it's Saturday, so no one really cares. Fall was interesting with NBC at least. One thing that I did notice was originally on the fall schedule when we looked at it, it was supposed to just be reruns, and we weren't sure what exactly show it was going to have. I think originally it was supposed to be La Brea they were doing for a little while, but when that turned out to be a big success, and when they realized that it didn't really need help finding an audience because it was popular enough to stand on its own, they actually replaced it with Ordinary Joe because that show was struggling a lot more. So they were trying to get more people interested in watching it, do a rerun in order for them to catch up, but it never really caught on. And then they just replaced it with various sports stuff because they knew that was a lot more reliable. I guess they currently have reruns of The Wall, so you go for that. And then winter, we'll just see what happens on Saturday. But it's Saturday, so no one really cares. And then SNL as well on Saturday, which this season of SNL has been really good so far, but that's not prime time, so doesn't really affect us here. But all right, guys, that is it for the podcast episode here. I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you feel free to like and subscribe and comment, as always, whatever you have to say here, that would be greatly appreciated. If you are watching this before Thanksgiving, have a great Thanksgiving and Christmas, of course, for the holiday season. We will see you in the next one. Take care, everybody.